This is the fourth class in the Rune Priest class. If you have not taken the first classes, some of this may seem a little confusing. It is important to always go back and go through the first class on By the Book and SL Standards, where I talk about the source material utilized for this class. All right? So hopefully Mystic will be copying and pasting for us. This class is available if you're listening on YouTube at www.portofironhall.com and is Rune Priest Class number 4. We continue today with festivals, which is considered likely to be one of the duties of the Rune Priests, though that is not clearly represented in the books. However, festivals are mentioned in Torvald's Land, which we covered last week we covered festivals in Torvald's Land. And so here we are going to go over some of the historical Viking festivals. I, however, will not be attempting to read either the Old Norse, Icelandic, or Latin, as I would sound very silly. So the quote that we open with is translated to, "They do not laboriously exert themselves in planting orchards, enclosing meadows, and watering gardens. Corn is the only produce required from the earth, hence even the year itself is not divided by them into as many seasons as with us. Winter, spring, and summer have a meaning and a name. The meaning and blessings of autumn are alike unknown." In stories Yngling Saga, he outlines the 3 main annual times for sacrifice as set out by Odin himself. Then they should sacrifice towards winter for abundance, and in the middle of winter sacrifice for growth, and the third in summer, that was a victory sacrifice. Interestingly, they made sacrifice in midwinter for crops, which does line up with the idea of a fall planting that we see in Torvald's Land, and in line to some degree with Yule. I would assume that the one that was the beginning of winter would be closer to the fest season of Odin, or the harvest festival. The third might be conducted with a Thing Fair, though I suspect it was a final blot done before the point when men would begin raiding. Here's a quote from Egil Saga. "In the spring, they started getting a big longship ready. Once it was manned, they went plundering that summer in the Baltic. They captured a great amount of loot and fought many good battles." When you're looking to play a Rune Priest, one of the things that you're going to come across when looking on the website are terms such as feigning and symbol. In the heathen community, you will find at least 3 types of rituals discussed: bloats, feigning, and symbols. The heathen community differentiates a bloat from a feigning by if the sacrifice was blood or not blood. In Norse tradition, all sacrificial rituals were called bloats, and the term feigning appears to be more Anglo-Saxon. Additionally, while there are references to ritual drinking in Norse tradition, the manner in which they were performed in modern heathenry is also more Anglo-Saxon. Norse tradition includes the bragaful and the mini instead of the Anglo-Saxon symbol. And here are some quotes. "The fire was in the middle of the floor of the temple, and over it hung the kettles, and full goblets were handed across the fire, and he who made the feast and was a godi blessed the full goblets and all the meats of the sacrifice. And first Odin's goblet was emptied for victory and power to his king. Thereafter Njord and Freya's goblets for peace and good season. Then it was the custom of many to empty the bragaful. and then the guests empty a goblet to the memory of departed friends, called the Mini, meaning remembrance. The braggerful, which means promise cup, or best cup, or even chieftain's cups, was, and I quote, in Norse culture a particular drinking from a cup or drinking horn on ceremonial occasions, which involved the swearing of oaths when the cup or horn was drunk by a chieftain and passed around and drunk by those assembled. The Mini was a ritual drinking to the remembrance of the gods. Further rounds of drinking might be made in remembrance of absent or departed loved ones. Generally, as a rune priest, you are at most expected to bless the horn or bowl as it is lifted and then passed around. It is a simple ritual where you breathe your blessing into the bowl, and we'll talk a little bit more about Galdar later on. Sacrifice. If you have not yet received a copy of Sacrifice and Sacrificial Ideology in the Norse Religion by Daniel Bray, please send me your email, and I will forward you on a copy. So, in Marauders, there's a discussion of human sacrifice. In the quote below, you will see that they had at one time been sacrificing thralls. But that did not seem to be pleasing to the gods, and instead they sacrificed Ver. There's no further suggestion in the books that the sacrifice of other humans was either continued or discontinued. And I quote, in a grove hung from poles were bodies of 6 Ver. In past days it is my understanding that they might have decided, however, a generation ago, by one of the rare meetings of the High Council of Rune Priests, attended by the High Rune Priest of each district, that thralls should no longer be sacrificed. This was not defended, however, on grounds of the advance of civilization, but rather on grounds that thralls like Ertz and tiny 6-toed Thalarian were not objects worthy of sacrifice. There had been a famine, and many thralls had been sacrificed. In spite of this, the famine had not abated for more than 4 growing seasons. This period, too, incidentally, was noted for the large number of raids to the south, also often involving entire fleets from Torvald's land. It has been further speculated that the gods had no need of thralls, or if they did, they might supply this need themselves, or make this need known through suitable signs. No signs, however, luckily for thralls, was forthcoming. It was taken as a vindication of the judgment of the High Council of Rune Priests. After the council, the status of Rune Priests had risen in Torvald's land. This may have had something to do with the fact that the famine, finally after 4 seasons, abated. The status of the thrall correspondingly, however, such as it was, declined. He was now regarded as much as the same category with the Ertz that won clubs in the Satarna sheds, or are pursued by small pet sleem kept there for that purpose, or with a tiny 6-toed rock Thalarian of southern Torvald's land, favored for their legs and tails, which are speared by children. Marauders of Gore. More on sacrifice. At the opening of the thing, it is explained that a bosk was slain. About their waist, a bag of omen chips, pieces of wood soaked in the blood of the sacrificial bosk, slain to open the thing. Upon the completion of a challenge, a sacrifice is expected to be made by the winner. When the first blood touches the cloak, the match may, at the agreement of the combatants, or in the discretion of one of the 2 referees, be terminated. A price of 3 silver tarn discs is then paid to the victor by the loser. The winner commonly then performs a sacrifice. If the winner is rich and the match of great importance, he may slay a bosk. If he is poor or the match is not considered a great victory, his sacrifice may be less. Marauders of Gore. When Tarl steps in for the challenge of a young free woman, Forkbeard gives the brother a gold tarn and instructs to have a boss sacrificed. "Boy!" cries the Forkbeard. The boy looks at him. The Forkbeard threw him a gold tarn disc. "Buy a bosk and sacrifice it," said the Forkbeard. "Let there be much feasting on the farms of the inlet of green cliffs." Marauders. There's no further examples of sacrifice, specifically human sacrifice in Marauders of Gore. For some historical notes on sacrifice in Norse religion, you may read more on the Wikipedia page linked here. Sacrifice is not just a bloody sport. To bloat means to sacrifice. When a ritual sacrifice of blood was made, it was called a bloat. However, the act of sacrifice was not done so that someone with a roleplay blood fetish could get their RP hump on. Sacrifice was done for a number of clear and specific reasons. One, obviously, as mentioned during the famine, was a mechanism for releasing social tensions in which a victim or scapegoat is needed to stop escalating cycles of violence. When the scapegoat is sacrificed, the crisis is averted, and the social and cosmic order is restored. This is a quote from Sacrifice and Sacrificial Ideology in Norse Religion by Daniel Bray. Another quote from the same author: "The ritual was usually intended to achieve a specific aim, from divining the future, as was mentioned previously, to a good harvest, growth, peace, prosperity, victory in battle, long life, power, revenge, and to bring about someone's death. To make sacrifice, not the animal, but the blood of the animal is offered to evoke the gods." Of course, the gods were also invited to the feasting in which the best of the animal would be set out to them, but that's not part of the actual bloat process. So here's an example of a Viking Age bloat. Sigurd, Jarl of Halor, was the greatest sacrificer, and so was his father Hakon. Jarl Sigurd upheld all the sacrificial feasts on behalf of the king there in the Thrandlaw. It was ancient custom, then when there should be sacrifice, that all the farmers would come there, where the temple was, and bring thither their provisions, those which they should use while the feast lasted. At the feast, all men should have ale. There was also killed all kinds of cattle, and also horses, and all the blood which came therefrom was called halt. And halt balls, those in which the blood stood, and halt twings, which were made like sprinklers, that this they should redden the entire altar, and also the walls of the temple inside and out, and also sprinkle upon the men, and the flesh should be cooked for food of the feast. There should be fires in the middle of the floor of the temple and cauldrons over them. A full horn should be carried around the fire, and he who arranged the feast and was leader should bless the drink and all the sacrificial food. First he should make Odin's toast. It should be drunk to the victory and strength of their king, and afterwards Nero's toasts and Frey's toast to abundance and peace. Then it was customary for many men to drink the king's toast thereafter. Men drank also a toast to their kinsmen, those that had been buried in mounds, and that was called Mini. Jarl Sigurd was the most liberal of men. He did that work, which was very famous, that he made a great sacrificial feast at Halar and bore upon the whole coast. Snorri Sturluson. People always ask me how to perform the basics of a blot. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and I'm going to insert the line that everyone needs to know if they're reading along to prove that they've read it. And in this case, the quote is towels. And take a quick pause and see if anybody has any questions at this point. We continue now with basics of the blot. At any point during the blot is it acceptable to add explanations, stories, or poems. This is especially helpful not only to educate those to gather, but to further set the tone. In addition, I like to set the scene with an explanation of the day and the environment. and to call the sim to the blot through the use of horns blown that can be heard by everyone. I particularly like to use the Hail to the Day prayer as an opening to a festival or bloat. Step number 1, setting up an altar. Number 1, determine the tools needed for the bloat. If items are to be set on the altar, then have them already on the altar, or for you to be able to add them easily. Number 2, don't add any unnecessary items just to make it look fancy. 3, an altar can be a table, a level stone, or just a pile of stones. 4, an altar isn't even necessary. However, it does lend some clues to those into the crowd as to who is leading and where to direct their eyes and attention. Step 2, establishing frith from Germanic spirituality, which is one of the required readings of this course. Number 1, the Rune Priest orders a member of the community to set the boundary markers. The decision should be made jointly by those leading the bloat, taking into consideration the number of people involved. 2, the Rune Priest then orders that the community attend while the boundaries are marked. In the past, this has been done with hazel wands and ropes, as described in Tacitus. But Germanic people have always been practical, so that anything including benches, natural markers, rocks put in place can also be used. At any rate, acknowledgement by the community of the markers and their meaning is crucial. Carrying of the fire around the boundaries can also be a nice touch, since this will help the greater community remember the locations of the boundaries. Number 3, the Rune Priest may begin the declaration with, "We are gathered here for A," the actual reason of the gathering. You may then add, "Who may attend," which may include the living, the dead, and non-corporeal beings. 2, who are considered free class or insider, and who are under the responsibility of another. This is especially important for children below the age of majority and non-heathen guests who may have a difficult time with protocol. 3, any special protocols which need to be in place. No weapons, cursing, fighting, interaction between designated groups, special titles, or the proper manner for addressing a task or designated people. 4, the level of outlawry should an infraction occur by the member of the free class and one of his wards. This may also be partially handled by the Rune Priest as law speaker, who is able to cite past decisions made. Once the declaration has been made, it may be declared legal by the greater community through some show of assent. Dissenters may need to be dismissed at this point. Lastly, a fire should be struck. Any kind of fire may be built depending on the reason for the gathering. In the case of the need for purification, such as during a season of sickness, death, or ill luck, for example, a need for one may be built, but from a practical standpoint, a piece of land is a field, but a piece of land with a cooking fire is home. A cooking fire still universally means social interaction, sustenance, conviviality, comfort, and cheer. It will remain a focal point throughout the gathering. As a role-play example, it might be worth it to keep everyone out of the area until the last step when the fire is struck, and then require each to name themselves in their lineage and claim, "I follow the old ways," before entering the area. 3, sacrifice. Sacrifice in Northern tradition, unlike Anglo-Saxon, is not only blood sacrifice. It can be grain, weapons, and drink, or even sacrificial oaths. Sacrificial meat can be roasted or boiled. However, doing such takes an unusually boring time in online roleplay. I recommend that for most blots with a large feast, that the sacrifices are done before the ritual and set to cooking by the fire. Slaves should not be cooking the sacrificial meat. You may choose to do the sacrifice before the bloat with those who are preparing the feast. Remembering it is the offering of the blood from the sacrificial animal that is the sacrifice, not the act of killing them that is bloat. If you intend to read the entrails of a sacrificed animal, instead sacrifice a baby animal. In the space you are not using for the sacrifice is not suitable for feasting, ritually have the men and women carry the animal or platter of food to the feasting area, or retire to the area where the feasting is done, and offer another prayer at that time. Acknowledge those who cook the feast, and welcome the free to eat. I would not offer any of the meat to slaves such feasting days. I would not give them more than morning gruel to remind them of their position. Invocations and summonings. The casting of lots or other forms of augury and omen can now come into the basic steps of a bloat. Read the liver or entrail of the sacrificed animal, cast your omen chips, or via spay, look into the future. You may, if you wish, offer a place for a Sidakona to come up and perform a shamanic foretelling. Given the reading of the whole of the people, I am them each with a personal message at the same time. It helps to have more than one priest to do this, divide the group up by name, or let each person who wishes their fortune come forward and ask for it. Step, optional. While this last step is more common to Anglo-Saxon tradition, there are many ways to work in a symbol and have a horn passed so that each who has entered the space might add their words or boasts, toasts, or oaths to the proceeding. There's some more information on how to symbol as a rune priest at www.portofironhall.com. Step 5, closing. You may close the blot simply by announcing that the frith has ended and encouraging those gathered to depart with the gods. I personally like to close with a reading of some sort to educate those gathered in the nature of the worship. There are many excellent poems on Odin's gift that can be used. Try to stay away from ones sounding too Wiccan or those that are not understandable by your audience. If you have erected space markings, it would be a good time to send apprentices around to remove them. Douse the fire. Take any offerings for the gods out to the woods and set them out for the animals, and pouring with it the last dregs of mead or ale from the cymbal horn. This is a historical example of a bloat, and I am going to read it. The procession creeps on a meandering path, preferably unseen to the Troll Mountains. A mass should be held for 3 days. This will be the beginning of the holiday. The frock is long, so it reaches down to the ground. The socks are sharply pointed. The hood is pulled down so that the holes for the eyes fit. Everybody looks alike except for the height. The prelate counts their number. The password is given in a low voice. The prelate blows horn 3 times. The fire is kindled with 9 kinds of wood. That is old custom. A sacrifice is offered to the spirits. Everyone is sprinkled with the blood. The best part is gifted to spirits. That remains is to be consumed by the men. In the midnight hour, when stars glitter, the prelate asks for silence, and this is obeyed by all the men. They fall down upon the ground. The prelate looks grimly at the heavens, and incantations and summonings echo in the dells. The prelate is summoning spirits. Everyone receives an answer to his question. No one heard from another man what their answer was. All right. So this concludes this class. It was a short class this week. Your homework for this week is to read the article Blot in an Historical Context by Swain Woding in the Book of Blots by the Troth. I also recommend you read the article Building a Better Bloat by Rod Landreth. He's a great Gothi, and I've met him a number of times. This is the one item I strongly encourage you to purchase. There's a lot of great examples here. Some are too modern for our uses, but as a place to start, this book is an excellent source. For those of you who are listening to the class, your final keyword is pillow.